You stopped mid-sentence 3 weeks ago and couldn't find the word calendar. Not a complicated word, a word you've said 10,000 times. You stood there, mouth open, and your colleague finished the sentence for you, and you smiled like it was nothing. But on the inside, something cold moved through you. That moment didn't leave, did it? It's been sitting quietly at the back of your mind ever since. This question you haven't dared say out loud, not even to your doctor, not even to your best friend, because saying it out loud makes it too real. You're going to whisper it here, where it's safe, where someone finally understands. Am I losing my mind? Let me tell you what I've seen in practice over the years. Women come to me, intelligent, capable, accomplished women, and they sit down and the first thing they do is look at their hands. Not at me, at their hands, because they're ashamed. A woman who built a career on sharp thinking, on being the one everyone calls when there's a problem, is now asking her husband where she put her keys that were in her hand 30 seconds ago. A woman who used to run meetings is now walking into rooms and completely forgetting why she went there. A woman who prided herself on being articulate, on never being at a loss for words, is losing them mid-sentence like she's reaching into a jar that keeps coming up empty. And the fear underneath all of that isn't just embarrassment, it's terror. Because in the back of every woman's mind, in the place nobody talks about, the same question is forming. The same quiet, devastating comparison. My mother forgot things. My aunt forgot things. And now I'm forgetting things. Is this how it begins? I want to answer that question directly and carefully, because the answer matters enormously, and it is not what you've been telling yourself at 3 a.m. Think about how you've explained this to yourself so far. You're tired, you're stressed, you're doing too much, juggling too many plates, sleeping too little, working too hard. You told yourself it's just the load you're carrying. You rationalized it, minimized it, packaged it into something manageable. Maybe you even mentioned it to your doctor once, almost casually, almost as an afterthought, and they told you it was anxiety or burnout, or that you should try to sleep more and reduce stress. And you nodded and went home, and 2 nights later you forgot your daughter's teacher's name, the name you've known for 2 years. So here's the contrast. What they told you, you're burned out. What's actually happening? Your brain's primary fuel source just started dropping out of the picture. And that changes everything about how we should be talking about this. Estrogen. Not a cosmetic hormone, not just the thing that makes periods happen or babies possible. Estrogen is a neurological nutrient. It is one of the most important molecules your brain uses to function, to form memories, to retrieve words, to sustain focus, to protect the architecture of the neurons themselves. Let me say that differently because I need you to really hear it. When estrogen levels begin to fall, and in perimenopause they don't fall predictably or steadily, they drop and spike and plunge in ways that are genuinely chaotic, your brain experiences something close to a power fluctuation. Not a blackout, a fluctuation. The lights flicker, the connection drops for a moment, and then they come back, and then they flicker again. That's the word-finding difficulty, the mid-sentence blank, the room you walked into for a reason you've already forgotten. That's not neurodegeneration. That's not early Alzheimer's. That's an estrogen-sensitive brain operating through hormonal turbulence, and nobody told you that. Why? That's a question I find myself sitting with more and more. Why is this, one of the most common, most frightening, most identity-shattering experiences in perimenopause, still barely discussed in a clinical visit? Women sit in offices for 7 minutes, mention brain fog, get told to rest more, and leave. The conversation ends before the real conversation can begin. I've spoken with women who spent 3 years believing they were developing early dementia. 3 years of private terror, of watching themselves for signs, of pre-grieving their own minds, when what they actually had was a hormonal transition that was measurable, addressable, and temporary. 3 years. That silence has a cost. And here's what makes this even more infuriating. Estrogen's relationship with the brain is not obscure fringe science. This is well documented. Researchers have known for decades that estrogen receptors are found throughout the brain, including in the hippocampus, the region most associated with memory formation, and in the prefrontal cortex, which governs executive function, decision-making, and yes, word retrieval. Estrogen supports the production of acetylcholine, one of the key neurotransmitters involved in learning and memory. It regulates the density of synaptic connections. It influences neuroplasticity, the brain's capacity to adapt, reorganize, and form new pathways. When estrogen fluctuates, not when it disappears entirely, but even when it fluctuates as dramatically as it does in perimenopause, the brain adapts, sometimes smoothly, often not. And the symptoms land exactly where they land: memory, focus, verbal fluency, cognitive speed. Now, let me be precise about something, because I hear the fear in the question, and it deserves a precise answer. Alzheimer's disease and perimenopause brain fog are not the same thing, not remotely, and the ways they present are actually quite distinct if you know what to look for. Perimenopause brain fog typically affects word retrieval, short-term memory, and sustained attention, but the underlying information is usually still there. You know the word calendar, you just couldn't access it in that moment. That is retrieval difficulty. It is different from encoding failure, which is when information doesn't get stored to begin with. Women with early Alzheimer's often get lost in familiar places. They lose track of the year. They ask the same question multiple times within minutes and have no memory of asking it. They may have significant changes in personality or judgment. These are fundamentally different from forgetting where you put your keys or blanking on a colleague's name under stress. That distinction is not meant to minimize what you're experiencing. It's meant to give you accurate information, because fear distorts perception. When you're terrified that every forgotten word is a harbinger of dementia, you stop being able to see the situation clearly. And clarity is exactly what this situation requires. There's another layer to this that I don't hear discussed enough. The perimenopausal brain fog doesn't just affect memory in isolation. It changes the texture of thought. Women describe it in ways that are remarkably consistent across different backgrounds, different professions, different lives. They say their thinking feels slower, as if they're wading through something. They say they lose their train of thought mid-paragraph, not just mid-sentence. They describe reading the same page 3 times and absorbing nothing. They talk about a kind of cognitive static, background noise in the mind that wasn't there before, that makes concentration feel like work when it used to be effortless. One woman told me it felt like trying to run in a dream. You're working so hard, your legs are moving, but you're barely getting anywhere. That metaphor has stayed with me, because it captures something real about the neurological experience of estrogen fluctuation. The effort is there, the intention is there, but the usual efficiency has been disrupted. And the gap between who you know yourself to be and how your brain is currently performing, that gap is what generates the fear. That gap is where the shame lives. Because here's the thing about the perimenopausal brain. It is not quietly deteriorating. It is reorganizing. There's research that genuinely moved me when I first encountered it. Work exploring what happens in women's brains as they move through the menopause transition. The earlier phase, perimenopause, is the rocky one. The flickering, the fog, the friction. But as women move into postmenopause and their brains recalibrate to a new hormonal baseline, many of the cognitive difficulties stabilize or improve. The brain adapts. It finds its footing on new terrain. That's not a guarantee written in stone. It depends on many things: sleep quality, metabolic health, stress load, nutrition, whether inflammation is being managed. But it is a pattern that appears consistently enough to matter. This is not a one-way door. And yet, so many women don't know that. They're sitting with the terror, and no one is handing them the context that would let them breathe. I want to say something else, and I want to say it directly. The women who struggle most with this phase aren't the ones who are somehow weak or fragile. They're often the ones who built their entire sense of identity on being mentally sharp, being the capable one, the one with the answers, the one who doesn't need help. And when the brain starts flickering, when the words go missing and the thoughts scatter, the identity crisis that follows is real, and it's not just medical, it's existential. Who am I if I'm not sharp? That's the question living underneath the fear of dementia. And it deserves an honest answer. You are still you. The sharpness is still there. It's operating in a biochemical environment that changed without asking your permission. And the sharper you are, the more disorienting the contrast feels. That is not irony. That is biology. Now, I've seen many women in this situation who were simply missing the right support. Not in a vague way, concretely. Specific approaches to sleep, to nutrition, to managing the hormonal chaos of this transition. Things that are actually accessible and grounded in what we know about the perimenopausal brain. And because I believe strongly that the information gap around this is one of the cruelest parts of the whole experience, I made a point of gathering what genuinely helps into something practical. It's all in the first link below this video. Take a look when you're ready. What's there has made a real difference for a lot of the women I work with. Let me tell you about Colleen, 53, a restoration architect, someone who designed complex renovation plans for historic buildings, who held in her mind spatial layouts, material specifications, structural requirements, all at once, for years. She came to me not with a list of symptoms, but with a single sentence. I think something is wrong with my brain, and I need someone to tell me the truth. She'd been to 2 other practitioners. Both had told her she was under too much stress. She'd been offered antidepressants twice. She'd declined twice. She knew, with whatever clarity she still trusted, that this wasn't depression. This was something else. When we talked through the timeline, it became clear. Her symptoms had begun around 49. The memory slips, the word fog, the uncharacteristic difficulty holding complex spatial information in working memory. Exactly the kind of high-level cognitive function that estrogen-rich brains perform most fluently, and exactly the kind that takes a hit when estrogen starts pulling back. I told her what I'm telling you now. She cried. Not from sadness, or not only, from relief. Because for 4 years she had been carrying a secret terror, and someone had finally given her a name for the thing that wasn't dementia, a reason that didn't mean she was broken, a trajectory that wasn't only downhill. She told me later that the most painful part hadn't been the forgetting, it had been the silence around it, the pretending, the performance of being fine at work, the effort of hiding something that felt so enormous and doing it completely alone. That performance costs something. It costs energy that should be going elsewhere. It costs honesty that the body desperately needs right now. And it costs women the opportunity to get actual, targeted help, because you can't receive support for something you haven't allowed yourself to name. So let's name it. This is perimenopause. This is your brain going through one of the most demanding biochemical transitions it will ever face. And you are not alone in this, not even slightly. Studies suggest the majority of women going through perimenopause experience some form of cognitive change. The majority. This is not an edge case. This is the norm. The silence around it is the aberration. And what's remarkable and infuriating in equal measure is how poorly prepared the medical system is to receive this conversation. Cognitive symptoms in perimenopause routinely get misdiagnosed. They get filtered through categories that don't fit. Depression, generalized anxiety disorder, attention deficit disorder. Yes, truly, women in their late 40s are sometimes given ADHD diagnoses when what's actually happening is estrogen-related disruption to the dopamine pathways that govern focus. The brain is the same. The symptom pattern can look almost identical, but the underlying driver is completely different. And if you're being treated for the wrong thing, you're not being helped. You're just being managed. I want to circle back to something because I think it's important enough to return to. That moment, you standing mid-sentence, reaching for calendar and finding nothing. What were you feeling in that moment, underneath the embarrassment? I think I know, because I've heard it described so many times in so many different words by so many different women. It wasn't just frustration, it was a flicker of the question you hadn't asked yet, a split-second recognition of something shifting. And you covered it, you smiled, you let your colleague fill the gap, you moved on. But a part of you didn't move on. That part stayed there, holding the question, waiting for someone to take it seriously, waiting for someone to sit with it and not minimize it or reframe it or explain it away, waiting for someone to say, yes, what you experienced is real. Yes, it has a cause. Yes, the cause is not what you feared. And yes, there are things that genuinely help. Here's what actually helps, without pretending there's a single magic answer. Sleep. Deep, consistent sleep is the single most powerful tool the perimenopausal brain has for recovery. During sleep, the brain runs what researchers call its glymphatic system, a kind of neural housekeeping process that clears out metabolic waste, consolidates memories, and restores cognitive infrastructure. When perimenopause disrupts sleep, which it often does, through night sweats, frequent waking, shifts in sleep architecture, the brain pays the price in fog the next day. Protecting sleep is not indulgent. It is neurological maintenance. Movement matters, genuinely. Aerobic exercise specifically has been shown to support hippocampal volume and BDNF, brain-derived neurotrophic factor, which is essentially fertilizer for the brain. New neurons, new connections, new pathways. That's not metaphor, that's mechanism. Stress management matters too. Not as a platitude, but because chronic cortisol actively interferes with estrogen metabolism and damages hippocampal neurons over time. Every time someone tells a perimenopausal woman to just reduce her stress without addressing the hormonal and physiological context, they're giving advice that's incomplete at best. Nutrition plays a role that is genuinely underestimated in this conversation. The brain is a metabolically expensive organ. It uses roughly 20% of the body's energy. And in perimenopause, when estrogen is no longer as readily available to support neuronal energy use, the quality of what you eat starts to matter in very concrete ways. Blood sugar stability specifically becomes relevant. Estrogen helps regulate insulin sensitivity in the brain, so when estrogen becomes erratic, cognitive function can become tethered to blood glucose fluctuations in ways it wasn't before. Women notice this. They notice the brain fog deepening after certain meals, lifting after others, worsening when they've skipped eating. They assume it's tiredness. It's often metabolic. And then there's the conversation about hormonal support, a conversation that deserves its own careful, nuanced exploration, which I've been working on. There's a lot of noise around this, a lot of fear, some of it warranted, much of it not. For women going through the perimenopausal transition, the question of whether and how to support their hormonal health is not simple, and it's not one I'd ever try to answer in a single paragraph. What I will say is this. That conversation is worth having with a clinician who takes your cognitive symptoms seriously. Not one who dismisses them. Not one who offers antidepressants before asking about estrogen. One who listens to the full picture. If you're not sure where to start with that, or what to bring into that conversation, I've put together something that might help. It's in the pinned comment below. Have a look when you're ready. There is a particular kind of loneliness to this. It's not the loneliness of being isolated from people. Many of these women are surrounded by family, by colleagues, by a full life. It's the loneliness of carrying a fear you don't dare say out loud, of performing competence in every room while privately wondering if something is slipping away, of living inside a question that feels too frightening to ask and too important to ignore. And what I find over and over is that the moment a woman is finally given permission to ask the question, "Am I losing my mind?" and receives a real, informed, honest answer, something shifts. Not just the fear, something deeper, something to do with trust. Trust in herself. Trust that her experience is real, that her body is not betraying her arbitrarily, that there are people in the world who actually understand what this feels like from the inside. That moment of being understood is not small. It is not just reassurance. It is the beginning of being able to actually do something, because you can't act clearly from inside a fog of terror. I also want to say something about the partners and families of women going through this, because they're in the room too, and they're often the most confused. The woman they live with seems fine, then not fine, seems sharp, then suddenly can't recall something said 5 minutes ago, is emotionally steady, then undone by a word. Partners reach for explanations: stress, work, the season, a difficult week, and they're not wrong exactly, but they're reaching in the dark. The context they need, the neurological reality of what perimenopause does to a brain, is not part of common knowledge. And so the woman carries the weight of explaining something she doesn't fully understand herself, or she doesn't explain it at all, and the distance grows. That matters. Isolation makes cognitive symptoms worse, not better. Social connection, genuine conversation, the feeling of being known and not judged, these have measurable positive effects on the brain. They're not soft secondary things. They're part of the neurological picture. So come back to where we started. You, mid-sentence, reaching for a word that wasn't there. The smile you put on. The cold thing that moved through you. The question you didn't ask out loud. You can ask it now. And the answer is no. You are not losing your mind. You are in the middle of one of the most underexplored, most misunderstood, most inadequately supported neurological transitions in medicine. And you deserve actual knowledge about what's happening in your own brain. You deserve a conversation with someone who takes it seriously. You deserve to stop performing fine when you are not fine. The fog is real, the fear is real, and the reason for it and the path through it are also real. This is something that can be understood, something that can be supported, something that, for many women, lifts. You are not your worst fear. You are a woman in transition. And transition, no matter how disorienting, has the other side. The word will come back. Not all at once, not linearly, but the brain that learned to run complex projects, raise children, navigate relationships, build careers, that brain is still yours. It's working in different conditions than it's used to. It's adapting. And adaptation, for all its difficulty, is one of the most profoundly human things there is. If this reached you somewhere important, stay close. Subscribe if you haven't. There's more coming, and the next conversation goes even deeper into what this transition is doing to the body that most practitioners still aren't talking about. You'll want to be here for that.